Hey, welcome everyone to our, let's see, what is this? Today is Monday, our Monday live stream. Excited to have you all with us. Our guest today is fantastic. While we're watching everything collapse, we're going to be getting into it because things are happening from everywhere. Before we go there, a quick reminder, if you don't know already, but if you're going to be in the San Diego area, San Diego, California area, next Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night. It's in the evenings only. I'm going to be speaking at Don Perkins' conference. You can go to the app, download the Hope for Our Times app. It's free to download. You can go there. Everything's on there. In fact, we were able to go live off YouTube last night, still on Roku and on Apple TV. It was totally cool. But you can download the app. It's free. Everything is on there, including with my guest right now. We are on there tomorrow. Lee Brainerd's going to be with me. There are so many exciting things to talk about, but we're going to get going here. You and I are in a world that is definitely collapsing, and man, in a sense, it also looks like it's about ready to blow up. So please welcome our guest today, John Haller. John, welcome.
Tom.
Great to have you on again.
We have a couple things to talk about.
No, there's nothing.
I would love to be in San Diego, by the way.
It's going to be, yeah. It's not a bad place. Not a bad place to be. Place. Other than dealing with California politics, it's a great place to be.
And your gas prices.
You know what? You know what? It's like out here. I guess the governor just says, "Suck it up, Buttercup," or whatever. It's ridiculous. They just add taxes and taxes and taxes.
My wife's SUV uses premium, so I bought it last night for $4.09 a gallon.
If I got it for $4.09 for regular, I'd be rejoicing.
2 weeks ago, I was paying $2.69 for regular.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's quite expensive now. I think it's pushing about $7 for regular right now.
Depending on what for paradise.
Yeah, no kidding. We have our fine governor who is part of the whole collapse system, the awful things that he does. Hey, listen, I don't want to talk about him. There's too many things to talk about. We're going to go over to Israel in just a few minutes, but let's start off with, I guess we'll call it for today, the elephant in the room, which is I'm looking at the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. John, this thing has escalated. Okay, what was a Saturday morning? I think you were one of the first people to alert me to the bridge, the Crimea bridge.
I think it was Saturday morning. I was getting ready. I was preaching on Sunday and doing my update, and all of a sudden it's sort of like just how rude these people are that they do that when I'm trying to prepare something else.
Yeah, they go and blow up something.
No consideration.
Yeah, none whatsoever. Okay, so the bridge is blown up. So we have Nord Stream 2 a couple weeks ago, then this bridge which connects, it's really the supply bridge for Ukraine, for Russia, right?
Actually, Nord Stream was less than 2 weeks ago.
Less than 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Oh, this really is
like
happening
a week
fast.
ago. It'll be 2 weeks on Wednesday.
Really? It really is happening fast.
I was thinking about this morning. I was going to send you a suggestion for a title. It's sort of like nothing has a shelf life anymore. I mean, so these major stories happen, and then 2 days later, we've completely moved on to something else.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm guessing most people have already forgotten about Nord Stream. So, I mean, we haven't, but I mean, okay, so we go to
the Germans won't this winter either.
Oh, it's going to be bad. It is going to be bad. So we've got to talk about that. Really want to get into Israel in just a couple minutes. So I don't want to spend all our time here with the Ukraine issue. However, it's escalating. This out of Zero Hedge. Russian strike hits German consulate in Ukraine's capital. Unacceptable escalation. We have Russia is saying that it is Zelensky of Ukraine who is behind the taking out of the Crimea bridge. So you're looking at this, and then Russia launches large-scale strikes on some 20 Ukrainian cities. So you have that, hits the German consulate. Zelensky, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so do you, I mean, and then we still have the submarine somewhere in the world, in an ocean, that is the Russian sub with the Poseidon missile on it. So that's out there too.
we hope that the Poseidon missile is still on it.
Well,
because that Poseidon missile is nuclear propelled on its own. It has its own nuclear propulsion and system. So that I think when they announced that a couple of years ago at one of the big Russian get-togethers, they can release that thing and it can stay in the ocean for a very long time, largely undetected, because it has its own like little nuclear reactor on it to power it.
So it can just go and go and go.
And it can go at very low speed. So our radar and that type of thing would not be set up to pick it up. So the thinking is that what they want to do is they want to send it into the western slopes of the volcanic-based Canary Islands, collapse that shelf, and that will cause a large tsunami to hit the east coast of the United States, anywhere from 200 to 1,000 feet high, is the theory. Now, it's not really been tested, but that would be. But just imagine that they said they were going to do that. Yeah. I mean, imagine the fear and even panic that would instill in people. And I don't put anything past Putin at this point. And people are poking him every day. It's pretty stunning. So where do you want to start? You want to talk about the bridge thing from
I do,
Saturday?
because in my mind, Zelensky is the biggest poker of the bear that's out there right now.
Yeah. So Russia claims that Zelensky did it. It seems that Ukraine has kind of claimed that they did it. I noticed that Sunday morning, I got up to prepare my update, and Ukraine had already released a commemorative stamp with showing the bridge with explosions on each end of it at the big span. And then, there are all these Ukrainian people with selfies, hey, look at what we did. Aren't we great? And all that other stuff with the stamp and, sort of photoshopping them in front of the stamp. And now, but today, what are they doing? Because of the strikes, multiple strikes, dozens and dozens of strikes of cruise missiles all across Ukraine. But this attack on this bridge, so let's set up the bridge a little bit. This bridge was one of the great achievements that Putin considered of his time in office. He's been in office a little over 20 years now. And you remember they changed the rules so that he could serve until at least 2036. So in fact, imagine that, or factor that into how you would feel about the world if he was in power for another 14 years. But so this bridge is the critical link to the Crimean Peninsula. The Crimean Peninsula has a couple of big problems. Now, first, Russia has Sevastopol, which they've always had that, even when Ukraine had its independence. They have a warm water port on the Black Sea at Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. But it's been largely an ethnic Russian area of Ukraine, just like those eastern provinces were that they declared independence or part of Russia just Friday on Putin's 70th birthday. So, but it didn't have a good railroad link. Everything had to be from Russia to the Crimean Peninsula had to go by ferry or boat or ship. But they built this bridge. It cost about $4 billion. They opened it in 2018, and you can see the videos. I played it yesterday of Putin driving across the first truck across the bridge. It's about 12 miles long. So it's a phenomenal piece of engineering. So Saturday, somebody attacked that bridge, and there were videos of a truck that they were inspecting the truck. Now, some are suggesting, well, that truck was loaded with C4 or something that they were taking across the bridge to supply troops, Russian troops in Crimea. By the way, the other part that Crimea lacks is it doesn't really have water. It's a pretty dry area. But what Russia did as it took over Crimea was it got control of a valve off of a river, and they were able to bring water down from the river into the peninsula. And so for the last couple of years, the farmers there have had record crops that they've never really had before because Ukraine kept that valves shut off. But now with what's going on in the southern part of Ukraine, where Russia and Ukraine are sort of battling back and forth, Ukraine was making some advances, and some people thought they were getting close to taking over that relief valve, which they could shut down. So they shut down the water. That's a big deal. You shut down the bridge. That's a big deal. So Russia is a country that only gets its military from one place to another almost exclusively by rail. Don't have the big air transports like the United States have. In fact, the biggest air transports in the world were built and maintained in Ukraine, but Russia's destroyed them in the war. These planes were enormous, built and designed by the Ukrainians. So Russia uses rail. So the rail link across this bridge, so there's one span that has 2 lanes in each direction, separated by a median, then there's a space, and then there's a rail bridge. The amazing thing about this attack is, so you see the truck driving down, and it looks like the truck explodes. I don't think the truck exploded. I think this was charges. It was either an underwater drone. I don't think it was a missile. You're going to see a lot of fake videos out there, by the way. I've already seen fake videos of a missile and some other things that I think are clearly made up. This is the age of fake videos. And that's going to be a big factor in elections coming up here pretty soon. So the truck is going across the bridge. It's in the right-hand lane. So it's 3 lanes away, 3 lanes and a strip of water away from the rail bridge. So I think if it was the truck that exploded and they knew the truck was going to explode, it would have been near the middle of the bridge, so it would do more damage and maybe damage the rail thing. But this thing goes off, so it's going to the west, and here comes a train from the east that's carrying cars of diesel fuel, tankers. And right where the truck blows up, that's where the fuel tanks, the fuel cars were on the train. So it's like trying to hit 2, I think I used the example with you of golf balls. It's like 2 golfers standing 200 yards away and each hitting a golf ball, and they collide in midair. So either the guy that did it, the people that did it, were incredibly lucky, or they had incredible intelligence to know the exact time that train with the cars that have fuel in them, because there were grain cars and other types of cars on the train, to get the fuel cars there to explode and burn and damage the rail. Now, the lane, so 2 lanes collapsed, and they didn't collapse just like where the truck exploded. There was 100 or 200 yards further down the road, another span collapsed as well. It's a pretty incredible attack. So the Ukrainians sort of claimed that they did it, but then the Russians have come out and said, we hold Ukraine responsible. And so now here we go with who did it, just like we were talking about who did the Nord Stream pipelines. And then the question becomes too, like with Nord Stream and with this, is how quickly can it be repaired? So Russia's already resumed traffic on the 2 lanes that were not damaged. And I don't know if they resumed rail service or not. I haven't been able to get that confirmed. But this is an amazing thing, because the way they were going to supply their troops and get their tanks that they might need in southern Ukraine, there along the river, where they were having the battles, they're going to do it by rail. They don't have a truck and road system like we have in the United States. They raise grain there in Russia, and it generates cash, and they have a lot of it, but it's not enough to have the excess revenue to build fancy roads like our interstate highway system. So as a result, they just don't have the ability to truck a lot of things in for their troops. In fact, a lot of their trucks have been destroyed in the early part of the battles with Ukraine. So they need the rail. And so the fact that this thing all the way on the other side of the road away from this rail thing did this, it was a stunning attack. This is one of the things they'll make movies like this, like they made about the raid on Entebbe that Israel did back in 1976.
Yeah.
And now Russia's mad.
Russia's mad, and it is escalating. And Zelensky pokes the bear. I personally think Biden has done some things too. You and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on that part of the whole Nord Stream thing. But regardless, pardon me.
Well, my point is that I just have, I think you mentioned Glenn Beck when you were talking to somebody the other day. And I'm like him. I have trouble wrapping my head around the fact that we have a pipeline, the Nord Stream, and it's shut down. There's not a Nord Stream 2 never delivered a cubic centimeter of gas to Germany at all. It never operated. And Nord Stream 1 was shut down for maintenance. And it was either Putin's shutting it down because he's mad at everybody and he's trying to prove a point. But he also said that we can't get repair parts because of supply chain problems, which is also a very credible thing to say. So when it's shut down, it's like, why would you do it? I mean, I know the answer to that. The answer is you would do it if you're trying to provoke a wider, bigger war. But I'm just having trouble. Why would somebody be so stupid? It's like I think I told you before we started talking. It's like I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it because, I have, people in my neighborhood that probably voted for these people. And it's hard to believe that I'm just having trouble thinking the way that they do. But clearly somebody did it, and it's like this constant escalation. So Putin's been escalating the rhetoric about using nuclear weapons. I have atomic weapons and I'm not bluffing. So, I mean, he's the one who's been saying that. Nobody else has been saying that. And, but now people are provoking him. And I think what President Trump said in a speech over the weekend was, we need to get this thing resolved or we're going to have nuclear war. And I heard somebody at lunch today on the radio saying this isn't the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, we grew up. Now you may not be old enough to remember the Cuban. I was in second or third grade, and I remember talking to my mother, and I remember asking her, watching these people talking on the UN, are we going to have a nuclear war? And it was a very tense time. I'm telling you that this is not like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because back then, there were nuclear weapons here and there. Russia has 6,000, 7,000 of these things in its arsenal. We have a lot in our arsenal, and it's a much more volatile world than it was in 1962.
Oh, it's much more volatile. And, I looked at Sky Glass. I talked with Monkey, had him on.
Sure, I'll watch it.
It's hard to get away from the U.S. involvement in Nord Stream 2. But you bring up a very interesting point also when I look at, people might wonder, well, why are we talking about these things? Because ultimately we can see where all this is going. And it was in all of the discourse where Jesus talked about wars and rumors of wars. I don't believe those things are fulfilled until the tribulation period. But we can see things escalating. And the context of the signs regarding last days events is birth pains upon a pregnant woman, increasing the frequency and intensity. So when you look at it with wars and rumors of wars, John, there's never been, you bring up the Cuban Missile Crisis, there's never been a time in the history of the world where we have had such a massive pregnancy rumor of war as right now, because literally the world could just go into this unbelievable nuclear showdown. And I don't believe it's going to do that yet, but it could. And so this is the biggest rumor of war that this world has ever faced, because if we throw China in and Taiwan in, and then of course with the Biden administration at the same time. So you throw in all these things, it's like the timing couldn't be more perfect for all of this. So I want to shift gears for a minute from here, because there's so much to talk about. If we had time, I want to talk about the economies of the world, because things are definitely collapsing, and I don't think things are going to be good. What Europe is faced with the winter does not look good. But let's go over to Israel, because we have the situation with the I can't remember the name of the gas field that's there between Haifa and Rosh Hanikra.
There are two fields. Well, the two fields that are an issue are the Karish field, which means shark, and then a little bit to the north of that, and a little bit closer to the landmass of Israel, Lebanon, is a thing called the Kana field. Sometimes spelled with a Qana or Kana.
Where's the Kana again?
It's a little bit to the north and east of the Karish field.
Okay, so it's just it would be just a little bit south of Rosh Hanikra, then I'm guessing.
Correct. Rosh Hanikra is the border crossing,
the northernmost.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have this whole situation with the gas. Obviously, what's going on with Europe and the need for gas, and everybody's talking about that. But John, there's other things with Israel, and then obviously with Lapid. And is Lapid going to make a deal with Lebanon, essentially Hezbollah? But this is something, John, that nobody brings up anymore. You hardly ever hear anymore. And one of our viewers just sent this over a little while ago, and it was regarding the Dead Sea. So folks, think of this. Not only does Israel have these massive gas finds, the energy that could supply Europe, that could be like an Ezekiel 38 hook, but listen to this regarding the Dead Sea. And Billy Crone did a message on this not too long ago too. But he writes, God dug a tremendous hole in the earth many years ago to use in storing a treasure for his people, which staggers the imagination. Yes, the lowest elevation on the earth's surface is the Dead Sea. The way God arranged things, the Jordan River and its tributaries have been washing minerals down into that hole, which God prepared for thousands of years. And in recent years, it has been found to be the most valuable depository of strategic chemicals in the world. George T.B. Davis, who led the Million Testaments campaign many years with its famous prophecy edition of the New Testament, has written in his book, Rebuilding Palestine, that one is almost staggered by the computed wealth of the chemical salts in the Dead Sea. It's estimated that the potential value of the potash, bromine, and other chemical salts of the water is 4 times the wealth of the United States. He continues, with the tremendous worldwide food shortage that threatens mankind, and any would-be dictator would take high risk to capture a treasure like this, which could furnish enough fertilizer for the whole world, and with its other chemicals provide the explosives needed to subdue all its enemies. And that's the Dead Sea. So when you take other things and you throw the Dead Sea in there, and it is the lowest place on earth. It's like this hole, I like how it's put there, a hole for all these treasures to be used in the last days.
So, well, let's unpack that just a little bit. So there's been a lot of excitement over the last few years, and I've seen articles and prophecy updates and everything where everybody's talking about, well, Israel's going to supply gas to Europe. Okay. And I'm saying that I think that could happen, but I think we're 3 years away from that at least. Our friend Pete Garcia wrote an article and he talked about the East Med pipeline. That pipeline is effectively dead right now. There's been no arrangements to finance it, and it's going to be hard to get it financed in a bad economy. And whatever it took, let's say it took 5 years to build Nord Stream 2 and it cost $8 billion. The East Med pipeline from Israel to Cyprus to Crete to Italy and Greece, that's going to have 1,200 kilometers underwater. Whereas the Nord Stream pipeline is at about 260 to 300 feet below the surface on the bottom of the Baltic. Baltic is relatively shallow. There are parts of the Mediterranean where this pipeline will have to go that are over 9,000 feet deep. So it'd be an incredibly difficult thing. So let me just give you a couple numbers. The Europe right now gets 155 billion cubic feet or cubic meters of gas from Russia each year. The 2 Nord Stream pipelines, there are actually 2 pipelines on each thing, were to deliver 55 billion. So about 1/3 from Nord Stream 1, 1/3 was going to come from Nord Stream 2. The EastMed pipeline, the proposals that I've read and looked about this, say that they're going to have 20 billion cubic meters a year capacity. So that 20 billion is not enough to supply 155 billion shortfall. By the same token, then the alternative is, well, let's do it by liquefied natural gas. That's 4 times as expensive as a pipeline, and you can probably ramp up a little more quickly. But Israel has to ship its stuff down to Egypt. They have a contract with Egypt to allow them to use their liquefied natural gas facilities. But that doesn't have that big of a capacity that's going to do that. And then there's a worldwide shortage of LNG shipping tankers. There's only 641 in the world. I did a lot of research on this the other day. They're supposed to deliver another 265 by 1928. So I'm just saying is that, yeah, Europe needs 155 billion cubic meters of gas a year to make up what they're not getting from Russia. Israel has proven gas reserves of about 40 trillion, not billion, but trillion cubic meters. So they could supply it. Okay. And they just discovered another 500 billion cubic meter gas field just like over the weekend. They announced it. So they have enough. By the way, Israel has 40 trillion cubic meters. Russia has 1,600 billion cubic meters. So 40 times what Israel has.
So
but Israel has enough to supply Europe and also to satisfy its domestic needs for quite some time. And they're gonna discover more gas. There's probably no question about that. But they're a couple years away from getting the LNG facilities to do this. And so this is where I think that the U.S. maybe has a reason to have done the Nord Stream bombing or destruction, is that we have 2 new liquefied natural gas facilities coming online here very quickly. It's interesting that the guy that is from the U.S. State Department, a guy named Amos Hochstein, who served during the first 2 Obama administrations and is now serving again in the State Department in that capacity in the 3rd Obama administration, he while he was in the gap there, while Trump was in office, Hochstein worked as vice president of marketing, executive vice president of marketing for a company called Tellurian, which is one of the big liquefied natural gas people in the world. And so now he's over there negotiating about EastMed, and it was under his direction that EastMed, U.S. support for EastMed got wiped out. Now the only alternative is liquefied natural gas. And lo and behold,
how about that?
Here comes the company I used to work for. We have some new LNG facilities coming, and Israel has gas, and but until Israel can ramp up the gas, its own LNG facilities, you're of a couple American companies that can come in and fill that gap up and get gas to Europe. So when you factor all that in, that sort of says, there's a reason for us to do that. It's just sort of a economic reason. Now, we would have to assume that the guys in government are sort of self-dealing, and it's kind of hard to believe that they would do that. I'm kidding.
I'm saying our current government.
It's kind of hard to believe that they're not self-dealing.
What a quinky dink. It all just, hey, how did that work out? Wow. This got eliminated, that got eliminated.
I got to get rid of this pipeline. No, you guys can't. We don't want to do these non-green energy deals. Israel, we're going to solar and wind, and we'll have plenty of power, and people won't even need to work. They can just go drink Starbucks and go to the museum or soccer games or something. That's the way they view the world, but the world operates in a much different way. But so having said all that, I do think there was a reason that either the elements within the U.S. and some of these globalists would do that because they know people are going to need gas. But now let's factor in the Dead Sea. So one of the critical things that are needed to make fertilizers, and we have this food shortage, and I was talking to a farmer last week, and he just says, input costs per acre are just going through the roof. And this year we probably had enough in the land to kind of get by, but next year we're not going to have the crop production that we did this year in the United States because there's a shortage of natural gas all around the world. But lo and behold, I think your reader who wrote that in about the Dead Sea, we used to talk about this a lot of years ago in Bible prophecy. Look at the wealth in the Dead Sea. And I think we kind of forgot collectively, but there's a lot there, particularly that will help in the manufacture of fertilizer. So in a world that's short of food, you go to where the supply is, and there's an incredible amount of chemicals and things there within the Dead Sea. So I think it's a very good point that your reader made.
Where do you think we are going? Because you literally were watching, okay, everything escalate with Russia. We can see Israel. I'm, in theory, going to be there in a few weeks. I'll send you pictures because I'm going to be in Rosh Hashanah at least for a day. So I'll get pictures of that whole area, Haifa, and the area of the Karish gas field and the other. It's going to be exciting.
You could swim out to the buoys there.
The buoy. Oh, the buoy.
Stand on top of them and wave.
Yeah, if I could get out there. You know, when I was out there in April, I'm standing there with David Towle. We were able to do a video. And he goes, it's that buoy right there that Lebanon never used to care about until the gas fields. Now they're saying this buoy needs to be moved. Okay, so.
Well, you know, Tom, layer on top of that, too, that while they're having this dispute, they're campaigning for elections in Israel too.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
And so this is a hot potato issue within Israeli politics right now. What's Lapid going to do with this? Netanyahu's losing his mind.
How could he possibly think that giving this, surrendering this or capitulating like this is a good idea?
Well, and it's not negotiating with Lebanon. It's not really even negotiating with Hezbollah. It's negotiating with Iran. So here we're going to do an Iran deal that if that happens, it's going to give Iran maybe up to $1 trillion. And then the money coming from this thing, I've heard, could be as much as $20 billion. And it's going to end up in Hezbollah's pockets. They're going to buy more drones. They're going to buy. So there's a whole thing here. And the question you ask is, where are we? You know, Tom, I think we've had a discussion about the seals of Revelation. When do they open? Do they have to open within the 70th week and that type of thing? And if you say anything that's a little bit different than that, everybody gets mad with you and they're like, oh, you're going off the reservation and that type of thing. But listen, we need to know what the prophecies say, but we also need to know that the prophecies are going to unfold in the real world. So I did an interview with Pablo last Thursday, and I brought up the seal where it says, you know, a measure of grain for a denarius. In other words, a measure of wheat and barley for a day's wages. And that's a characteristic of that particular seal, you know, where famine comes. But then my question to Pablo was, well, if it's half a day's wages to get a measure of wheat, I mean, where do we say along the line that, okay, you know, now this fifth seal thing is operative, you know, because it's, is it half a day's wages or a quarter day's wages or 3/4? And we say, oh, I think we're on track for this.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying because, and I do get some people mad at me, but I mean, you look at it, you got the white horse, you have this red horse, a great sword. We are staring in the face of a great war breaking out. That we really are. And then,
that's what I titled my update a week ago, Slapping the Red Horse.
Okay, and then you come to the black horse. What do you have? You have a hyperinflation situation, a day's wage essentially for a loaf of bread. You have that. We're staring at that. We are looking at a very real scenario that is coming. I do not think America, the United States, is going to be affected anywhere near the way other countries are going to be affected, and some already are. But you also have this, and don't harm the oil or the wine. I do believe the illustration that's given there with the black horse is talking about food elements, bread, oil, and wine. The oil and the wine are indicative of the elite class. That's how I look at that. So you have people at the top that are orchestrating these things. They're not going to be hurt. But the other people are going to be hurt, and that's the way these unfold. And I agree. How far along? When do we get there? And that's probably another conversation for another time. because we're going to get people on both sides shooting at us here in a second. But I got to ask you this, because we got to get to questions here in just a minute, but where do you see this 6 months from now when we look at the fertilizer problems, the food problems? Because if in fact the Dead Sea plays into this fertilizer, solving a lot of these problems for those who have that spoil, right? The fertilizer and so forth. That would project that the world has to be in a place where they are really crying out for food. People are dying. It's become very significant. And but where do you see this going? Let's say, I know it's just speculation. 6 months from now, the economy, you and I both pay attention to. We pay attention to markets. I pay attention to gold and silver markets. I pay a lot of attention to real estate markets. But I don't just pay attention here. I will watch what's going on in China, Canada, Australia. Where do you see the?
You got to kind of look at different markers. So, I sort of look at what people do. So here's the head of Evergrande, which is the big real estate company in China, which is just cratering. And part of that is because the demographics of China are changing. They're aging population, and they've put everything, and they've overfinanced real estate. And when you overfinance something, you get more of it, and the prices. Well, if you don't have more of the product, the prices go up. And then when it craters, everything's crashing all around you. So here's the head of Evergrande. He used to be worth $45 billion. He just put the house he bought a few years ago in London on Hyde Park. I've seen it. The most expensive real estate deal ever in London, £230 million for this house. I think it's, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of square feet, 45 bedrooms. He never lived in it, but he's put it on the market, and they think it's going to go for maybe half the price that he bought it for a few years ago. In China, their economy is in very bad shape. Russia's economy is in bad shape. The U.S. dollar seems to be doing pretty well right now, but you hate to think that the best thing your country can export is money, fake money, fiat money. The answer is, Tom, I'm really struggling to figure out where this is going, because I get financial advice newsletters and that type of thing. And I have one people saying, oh, this is just a market correction. And I have the other saying, this is the apocalypse. This is the financial apocalypse I've been warning about for years. And I'm kind of leaning towards the apocalypse thing. Listen, with the lack of gas in Europe this winter, it's going to be awful. I'm hearing estimates of 1 million Germans dying because of the cold. In Germany, rich, prosperous, industrious Germany. I've seen the UN reports that food, putting people on the verge of famine, is going to go up by 100 million people in the world this year.
Unbelievable.
I mean, literally, Tom, we could be sitting here in 7 months, 8 months, a year, talking about the 100 million people that died from famine and cold and that type of thing over the last year. I have a lot of people who follow me in South Africa. They have 8 to 10 hours. This is South Africa. This is a fairly prosperous country. They have 8 to 10 hours a day of no power in a lot of parts of South Africa. In Lebanon, they have 1 or 2 hours of power a day. How do you function in the modern world like that?
And it's going, and all projections are, John, that's going to get worse. And we have them trying to force these ESGs, which will make this, how do you even measure how much worse it will become if these ESGs are forced on us? And it's not just, it's pretty much the world is where these ESGs are being forced.
Sure, it's the green agenda to get away from what they call fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, which are the most efficient fuel source we've ever had in the history of mankind. You can't buy a wood-burning stove in Germany right now. In fact, Michael Snyder at Economic Collapse blog, I highly recommend you read it. If I would not have sharp objects around, because you'll want to slit your wrist. But they're talking about burning manure in Germany for people to keep warm this winter. I mean, this is Germany. Okay, this is 2022.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say where it goes. And I think the United States, we have a highly agricultural, very efficient agriculture and that type of thing. But then you throw on top of that, Tom, I just read this article this morning. They're not getting some barges up and down parts of the Mississippi because of drought, and the Mississippi river levels are being low. I mean, this is what the river system that we have, and back in the 1800s, it was canals and that type of thing. This is what makes America the most unique country in the world. We have our breadbasket has navigable rivers all the way to the ocean. And we've built the St. Lawrence Seaway and that type of thing to get things from the north. Have you ever been to Duluth, Minnesota? Go there sometime. It's this enormous port right in the middle of America on a lake. It's one of the biggest ports you'll ever see. But now we're going to have trouble getting things to market.
Yeah.
I think, I'll say this and some people get upset. You need to think this through, use your head about this, and you need to do some preparation. And I know the Lord will provide and everything, but he also gave us a brain to think with. And I will say, if you're a believer, he gave you a brain of a person who's sanctified, justified, and is filled with the Holy Spirit. So you should be able to think through these things a little bit better. Yeah. But I think this is going to be I don't see how they get past doing this green agenda. And let me just answer this ESG, and then we can go to questions if you want. The ESG, I did a big update about it a couple months ago. It's pushed by two countries, by and large. Russia through funding green groups around the world to push for this. And another country called Saudi Arabia through its Future Investment Initiative Institute, FII. It's sort of like the Saudis' Davos. So you have Davos, you have the Saudis' FII, you have the World Government Summit in Dubai, and then you have the St. Petersburg economic thing. And they're all pushing this ESG. And I played a clip yesterday of the G20 conference in 2018, where Putin runs into the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who's now been made Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, by the way. And they're high-fiving each other, and they're doing the secret handshake, and they sit down and they're joking and everything. And they were together last week, and they cut production. That's troubling. It's going to crater gas. And that was a direct slap at the United States, because they promote the ESG, because you stupid Americans, you'll shut down all your production. Dave Walsh said the other day, Dave Walsh Energy on Getter, you can follow him. We've cut back new production by 87%. Wow. Pretty much around the world. And we think that solar and wind is going to do it. Solar and wind's not going to do it.
Yeah, I can
people
tell you.
People are going to freeze to death this winter. Yeah. And when people get upset like that, people go to war or governments change. So I don't know if I would be reluctant to predict, like Friday, what's going to happen by Friday, let alone in a year.
It is. I can't even predict what's going to happen tomorrow anymore. You know, we're going to wake up. Along the lines of prepping, I do want to say this, John, is just for all of our viewers. I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. John has a little bit different view. Maybe someday we can talk about that, but I wholeheartedly agree with John. And one of the challenges I have with the pre-tribulation rapture crowd, John, and listen, I don't want y'all getting mad at me, but we don't know when the rapture is going to happen. And if we would look back to 2019, and you told people in 2019, listen, you better get prepared because we're going to go through this over the next 3 years. You say, that's never going to happen. Look where we've been. All this began with coronavirus. And if we get shut off for anything we say, the app is still alive, folks. So you can go there, and we're going to take questions from both YouTube and the app in just a second. Listen, if we're here in 6 months, it doesn't look good. And if you prep, I say praise the Lord. And put the Bible in there, put tracts in there. You can do, you can have thumb drives in there with messages about what the tribulation's going to be like and who Jesus is. Put them in there with your food, because once you're out of here, no matter when that day happens, your neighbor's going to break in and take your food. So be a blessing to them with food, and be a blessing to them with the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because Jesus saves. But we do need to use our brain and understand we need to be prepared. And listen, you look at other parts of the world, they're already suffering, and there's plenty of Christians that live in those parts of the world, and they are already going through these things that we are talking about.
You have a revolution almost going on in Iran right now.
Yes, we do.
And a rapidly growing church there. So
rapidly.
Crazy.
I think it's the fastest growing church in the world from everything that I can tell. Okay, we got to get to questions. And listen, our hope is in Jesus Christ. It's not in the things of this world. So we need to remember that we are citizens of heaven if you're in Christ. So we don't have to worry about these things, but you want to use your brain and be prepared. And not only that, but you can help other people out. So if don't be selfish about why you do things. In the book of Acts, when they were preparing, it happened in Acts chapter 11, they actually prepared. Guess what? They helped other people out because they knew a famine was coming, and Caesar even knew a famine was coming. Check it out, Acts chapter 11. They prepared. Joseph prepared. So we can use our brain and be prepared until that day comes and help other people out. That's what Joseph did. That's what they did in the book of Acts. Okay, let's take your questions, everybody. I see Lisa D. Thank you very much for having that, putting that out there about the question. Put the word question in all caps, whether you are on YouTube or on the app. So we're going to go to both of those right now to pull up what we can. John's already been on for like almost an hour already, but I don't want to hold you on here too long, John. But let me get to this. Let me see. Switching back and forth with questions is kind of a challenge, but we're going to do it. Here's the first one. That's Lisa. Lisa, you're on both. This is awesome. Lisa's on. How does she do that? She's on YouTube and on the app. So questions. Oh, they're flying in, John. They're actually coming too fast. Question. TP, are we going to be here when USA gets nuked?
At this point, I often wonder what my parents and stuff thought back during World War II when we were going through a war. We may still be here. I don't know. I don't have anything that indicates that we're out of here before that. There's, a big theory out there that the U.S. is Babylon of the end times, and Babylon is destroyed. So,
that could make for another great conversation for us. I also listen, John.
Get everybody mad at us.
I'll tell you. Here's another one that gets people mad at me. I do not believe that China's going to have a 200 million man army crossing the dried up Euphrates River, and I believe I can support that biblically and with other evidence. And people get so mad at me when I say it, but that's my thinking. So
sure.
So we could have a lot of conversations. Romaine Jane, question. Do you think this is the beginning of Ezekiel 38 war? No, I think it's set up. What do you think, John?
I think that war probably happens in this 70th week period after the midpoint. I think it's in a couple of sections. I think 38 and 39 are kind of two separate parts, and one is, after the midpoint a ways, and then the other one's towards the end in Armageddon. That's my view.
Yeah.
But I believe that it was before the 70th week too at one time in my life.
I go back and forth on that.
I talk about logistics, and I'm just saying so let's say Russia's part of this. That's controversial too, but I'll assume Russia's part of this. Russia's not doing very well right now. They have tremendous firepower and that type of thing, but their logistics haven't been able to supply people in Ukraine, which is right next door, let alone 1,000 miles further away in Israel. And what does that whole thing mean? A great company and a mighty army. And how do you factor drones and AI stuff into that? I think that I just don't think Ezekiel 38:39 is imminent. I think things are being set up for it, but I don't think it's imminent.
A couple of other questions for you. I agree with you on these things, John. Do you think there will be a draft in the United States soon? Military draft.
That would be something to hope for, because that would mean there's still a United States.
I hope there is no draft. My son's 20 years old.
I don't think there will be, but I mean, we can't supply our armies right now. All the National Guards are falling apart because they can't keep people because of requirements that they've put on, and people don't want to be part of a woke military. I play golf with a retired Air Force general, and the stuff he's telling me that's going on at the Air Force Academy would depress you. And he's like, I can't support the Air Force Academy anymore because it's woke.
Mm-hmm. It's terribly sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Do you think, this is from Annette Gurley, do you think drones can be part of Ezekiel 38? Well, I would certainly think so.
I think so. I mean, it was very interesting when they did the Israel 50th anniversary a few years ago, or 70th anniversary. They had drones in formation spelling out 70. And it was sort of an indication, like, if they can do this for fun, what can they do for the battle side?
Yeah, no kidding. This next question comes from Paula JB. Do you have any information on the cyber attacks on the U.S. today? I'm guessing she's speaking of the airports.
I think it was the airport websites. I'm not sure that it affected the airports themselves.
Here's where I have a challenge with some of the cyber attacks. Did it come from Russia? Did it come from China? Did it come from, is it a false flag? I mean, how do we know?
Yeah.
The
denial of service maps seem to indicate that it came from the area of Russia. But, maybe they planted something to make it look like it happened. But clearly we know that the cyber attacks are going to happen from everybody. It's part of warfare. I mean, front pages of the Tehran Times the other day were Iran's under a massive cyber attack. So somebody's attacking Iran. It could be Israel attacking Iran to keep them. I mean, look what they did with the Stuxnet virus and that type of thing. So
I was trying to remember the name of that. Thanks.
Yeah, Stuxnet. So, and that was a big game changer. So that's the thing, is all this stuff we're seeing is game changer, because everybody's kind of left infrastructure, vital infrastructure alone. And then somebody goes up and blows up Nord Stream. Now, Nord Stream may be able to be repaired fairly quickly. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it was an attack on vital infrastructure. And does that mean all pipelines, all undersea cables, all undersea internet cables are fair game now?
Yeah, it does mean that. I mean, that's the way it really does mean that.
So that's why whoever did it is, a lunatic, totally mad, totally evil, or all of those. And that's why I'm like, it might be the president, the people in charge of our country that did that, which is very, very troubling.
Yeah. Another question, I think it really goes along the lines of cyber attacks and different things that we do see happening. This is from Allison Stollmiller. Could the Ezekiel 38 battle be fought literally with swords and bucklers and horses because of an EMP or nukes or whatever? And there's a lot of, actually, John, you'd be aware of this. There's a lot of prophecy teachers that have actually said that for years, that something's going to happen that's going to cause it to go back to that. What are your thoughts?
I think that would be, certainly that's always possible. If that happens, then I think that happens further into the future, because if you're going to need all those horses, you got to breed them and raise them and get them trained and everything. So it's a logistical problem.
So that's a lot of horses.
Right.
A whole lot of horses.
But there would be a lot of manure for Germany to burn for fuel in the winter, too.
Yes, there would. Yes, there would. One day says, do either of you believe the church will end as it started, persecuted and betrayed?
Yes.
Yeah, and
That's
John, Chuck Smith used to say that all the time, founder of Calvary Chapel, and he used to say, as it began, that is how things are going to end. And I look at it, and this is another reason to be prep-minded spiritually is the most important thing. We want to take care of. You got to take care of your own family. So it is a good idea to consider your groceries, your pantry. You have to use your brain. But in our church, John, you probably do something similar. We really try to get people involved in home groups because if things, we went through, in California, it was you aren't going to open your church. Well, we did anyways. We didn't we didn't obey the governor. We obeyed God. We thought that was a better approach. But wow, the way things were going, I'd say, yeah. And also, John, I'm sure you hear it, there's people that watch our programs all over the world that we would call the remnant, that becomes, they get together with friends and it becomes their church.
I'm thinking of one of our mutual friends says sometimes, and one of his taglines is in Bible prophecy, the first Christians were Jews, the last Christians will be Jews.
Very good.
I like that.
Very good. 8 years. It was 8 years from the first Pentecost where it was Jews who were filled with the Holy Spirit until Cornelius comes along in Acts chapter 10, and you read his 8 years before you have I call it Pentecost 2.0 with Cornelius and the Holy Spirit falling upon them.
Well, Judea, Samaria, and the othermost parts of the earth, the Holy Spirit followed right along with that.
Yeah, I think that's great. The first Christians were Jews, and the last Christians are going to be Jews. Here is, let's see, Bride Woman is correct. A scripture, this is from the app. Thank you, Bride Woman, you're absolutely correct. Scripture does not say anything about a revival in the last days.
It says that there will be people come to faith in Jesus and the Messiah. Whether it's a worldwide revival, I don't see that either myself. We hope for that, but I don't see it.
I should probably frame it with timing. I believe somewhere in the tribulation it does happen because there's people from every tribe, nation, tongue, and people group. Mm-hmm. But from what I'm understanding, the way this question came up on the app is before there's a rapture, whether it's the timing I believe or the timing you believe, before the rapture. The scripture doesn't tell, in fact, the scripture didn't tell us about any revival or awakening that was going to happen, and they've happened over the centuries.
If you look at the two great awakenings that happened in America, one seemed to have a pretty significant accomplishment. That was back in the days of Jonathan Edwards. The second Great Awakening, though, didn't have a good result. It was probably the most prominent preacher of that was a guy named Charles Finney, who was from up the road here in Elyria, Ohio, was the second president of Oberlin, which is a uber radical university now. But they had a place up in New York where the Great Awakening they thought was most effective. It was called the Burned Over District. But it's interesting, after that Great Awakening, what did we have coming out of the burned over district? Great churches? No, we had Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. It gave birth to some cults. So sometimes these, what we think are Great Awakenings can turn out to be kind of fake.
Excellent.
So we have to be careful about that.
Excellent point. The only Great Awakening I know that will happen will be the one that's written about in the book of Revelation, where people will be wakened up to the truth. John, you've been on a long time with me today. Thank you so much for all of your time.
Sure.
I really enjoyed it. We have a lot of things we can discuss back and forth sometime. Some of our differences we should bring up, because I am curious, do you believe a 200 million Chinese army is going to come over?
I kind of lean that way. Yeah.
Okay. So
on that, I'm a traditionalist.
Yeah.
Not so much on other stuff, but I guess.
I'm not on that. So anyways, John, it's great having you with me today. All your info is in the description. You want to get a hold of John, follow him. John's just a wealth of information. Thank you so much. Anything else? You shared a prophecy update yesterday, didn't you?
I do one every. Well, I've actually been doing one or two midweek ones now too, because there's just I have too much stuff to talk about on Sunday.
There are a few things.
So we have our own app at Fellowship Bible Chapel. You can get that Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube, Real FBC on Rumble. I'm also on a thing called RTNTV. .org, and there's an app there as well. So we're trying to get alternative platforms because we know that our time is limited on the platform that we're speaking on right now.
Yeah,
pretty sure.
Yeah, we are out of time because it goes off the app in just a second. I don't want to shut off the app and so forth and have that closed on. So thank you everybody for joining John and myself. John, it was delightful to have you with me again. We may talk about scary things, but we put it in the right context. It builds our faith. Remember, our hope is in Jesus Christ. Our citizenship is in heaven, and we are going home. And these things are reminders that we're getting closer and closer as each day goes by. Thanks, John.
Thanks,
Talk to you soon. All right. God bless. Bye, everyone.